Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. I am your sensei, your griot, and don't believe a word I say. This program is just for those with an open mind, and those who can suspend their disbelief, and those who do not live in fear. Look at that. Thumbs up already. Two of you there. Good to see ya. And I'm starting as my clip picture images from the outback. Right? Images from my stay. I lived with this Aboriginal tribe, and for a whole year, you know. I and my lovely wife, Donna Ann, right? Look how happy that girl is. And we're living in squalor. You know, we are 900 miles the nearest supermarket, Walmart's, anything, right? We had no camping gear whatsoever. You know, we lived, here I am. This was the opening picture. I only got our top, but that was the oldest man. He was in his hundreds, right? And he could outwalk me, physically do anything, right? And if you notice, I'm wearing these army boots, and he is in bare feet. They all had bare feet. Their feet were like shoes, right? And they were connected. Their chi was connected to the earth, right? And that is our problem. So here is where my lovely Donna Ann and I lived. And what that was were big leaves and sticks. And this was an area that got washed out. And there was a big hole. So it was into the ground, right? And so we covered it up. And we had a nice little space underneath in the dirt, right? And it was clay, and we tamped it down. And we put different grasses that they help us pick that kept the insects away. And because we ate what they ate, which were the plants and grubs and insects that were all around us, we did not get insects to want to eat us. But the folks who came to visit and were eating, hot dogs and cheeseburgers and Twinkies and sodas, they. So these folks who in the 1970s were of a tribe of about 900 folks. And when they were out in the middle of nowhere, the Nukumba, the Northern Territory, just about 300 miles south of Ayers Rock, they found coal, uranium, titanium, and gold on their land. And so the corporate entities came out and just shot everyone in the head. It was a lot easier to do that than to get them on a school bus and go, oh, we're going to take you to another nice place. No, they just killed them. And the 9 people who survived that Holocaust were out picking berries. And this woman here, who's holding a baby that she just had in this picture, kid is like no more than a few hours old, and she's got him on the tip, and that kid grew up like, within a few months, he looked like he was 2 years old. He was running around. He was baby Jesus, right? And so here are people who have been, recently experiencing a Holocaust, and see, Holocausts go on all the time. And what it is, what happened to the Hebrew, not the Jews, the Hebrew nation, was their root race was being erased and replaced with a Zionist facsimile, right? And that was what the Nazis thought the Aryan race was, the Zionists, right? And so the story is very confused, and it has so many threads. And what we learn as history is a joke. It's a comic. It's worse than, Stan Lee's Marvel Comics, right? Hey, Graham. Hey, folks. So, boo-ba-doo-boo-boo. Do-do-do-do-do. So, what is freedom? Those people had freedom. They lived out in God's country, which was a desert that people thought was terrible. Holocaust. How could you live like this? When the white folks came, who hired me, and paid us to go do an ethnography with this tribe, because they wanted to show the rest of the world that they weren't so bad, that they actually were taking care of these people, right? And giving them their freedom. And basically, when they came in, they gave me a Bolex movie camera, and when I was filming their corroborates, their sacred ceremonies, it friggin' blew their minds, right? Because they saw this guy find a red Samsonite suitcase buried that you couldn't even see, and there were no landmines. Landmarks, and he just kind of, there it is, dug it up, right, and opened it up, and it was like twigs and string and feathers and stuff, and he made a animal, right, tied it together, and made a mask. He urinated into the thing where the dirt was and made a paste and put it on his face and stuck the feathers and rocks in his face, and it dried, and it became a kind of mask, like, whoa, like, the movie The Mask. That was what it was. Then he went into state and went into ceremony, and that twiggy thing that he stuck together with twine and dirt became a snake or a bird or guana or kangaroo, whatever the ceremony was for.
Sorry, something went wrong. Try again in a few seconds.
And, the experts on the Aborigines from the university at Perth came up. They were our supervisors and said, "How did you fake that?" Well, we were living out in the middle of that desert. We had no darkroom, no running water, no chemicals. All I had was a changing bag to be able to take the film out of the camera, put it in a can, tape it up, put it in a lined mail bag that had their address and stamps on it, and every week or two, the guy from the station would come by and grab that and mail it for us, right? And then after about 3 months, 6 months or so, these guys showed up in their, four-wheel drive Land Rovers, and they had tents and all kinds of great equipment, and set up camp and studied the Aborigines. And the Aborigines basically ignored, went to see the experts on the Aborigines, because I really never lived with them. They said, "Oh, they're like children. They're innocent. They're naive. And they don't believe it. You can't take their picture. It steals their soul, blah, blah, blah." All this, totally wrong, right? And these people were the most sophisticated, righteous, loving, and their tribal name, Walamajir, translates to human being, right? So here we are. We're on the precipice of, end times or new beginnings. And so here, listen to this lady. She is quite interesting. I like her.
And eradicate it instead. There are multiple reports coming out of South Korea and China that recovered patients are retesting positive for the new novel coronavirus.
Oops.
What is going on?
Can
we get this virus again after we were cut back?
I'm going to be getting, okay.
Coronavirus have been discovered. Does this mean immunity is impossible? Would a vaccine even work? And what about the reports of people being reinfected with the virus? We're going to talk about all of that right now, but please first hit subscribe and hit the bell. The more subscribers this channel gets, the more the algorithm puts the content in front of more.
Right, hit the bell for me,
Subscribe. The original version of this virus is thought to come from bats. We're going to call it type A. However, according to a very small study, So this means it could
Whoops.
change. This was a small sample group of only a few hundred people. It appears
I got the wrong one here. Let's see. Do 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 do. What happened to that? Let's see what this is. Yeah, this might be it.
Oh no, my castle's under attack! Nah, that's okay. I didn't really like it anyway. Yeah, let's abandon that.
against national lockdown orders. Germans are using their constitutional right to assemble. They are protesting against the government telling them they no longer have the right to freely leave their homes. With 95% of Americans under similar lockdown orders, I'm scratching my head wondering, where are all the progressives and libertarians? Oh, that's right, they're at home. Many of whom are in agreement with our rights being stripped away from us, saying it's in the name of safety and security. I've heard that one before. In Mississippi, the police broke up a drive-in church service where parishioners sat in their individual cars listening to the service on the radio. The police were overheard in video saying, "Your rights have been suspended." All across the country, churchgoers and pastors have been issued tickets for attending services. At one church in Virginia, 16 people were sufficiently spaced apart in a room that seats 293. Yet the police broke it up and issued the pastor a criminal summons. In Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer has banned the sale of anything she deems non-essential in the big box stores such as Home Depot, Walmart, and Target. People are now prevented from buying home improvement supplies or even seeds to plant food in a garden. Essentially, they are told to stay at home and aren't even allowed to pass the time productively. Birthday parties and funerals are being broken up by the police, and unless you carry an essential worker document, the police are well within their rights to stop and ticket you for violating the stay-at-home orders. You have lost your right to leave your home unless you are going out for groceries or medicines. And that is just in America. All around the world, governments have issued new laws and new ways to control their populations, whether through tracking apps or, in some cases, brute force. I understand there's a deadly virus circulating around, and I understand we all need to keep ourselves and each other safe. But I question the method in which we all seemingly have agreed to. When any of us talk about strategies that don't involve mandatory lockdowns, we're accused of putting money over people, especially when talking about strategies to achieve natural herd immunity. I want to know, since when is following a known scientific approach become a Republican idea and sheltering in place while waiting for Big Pharma to rescue us with a vaccine a Democrat idea? This is where I'm confused. Many of us who fight for the freedom of Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and against the Patriot Act are now in another moment of terror, willing to relinquish the very rights our founding fathers risked and gave their lives for. We shelter in our homes while the greatest wealth heist in human history happens right under our noses. You want to talk about money? Opening the economy isn't about helping Wall Street or benefiting capitalists. People have it backward. Keeping it closed is allowing the banks and investors to squeeze any and every last ounce of financial freedom we might have had away from us. Banks make their money from giving out loans. Now suddenly the economy is stopped, yet the banks are largely still collecting mortgages, rents, car payments, and credit card payments. People are now scrambling to get loans to cover the loan payments they already have. Renters are being given rent deferments but are expected to pay it all back as soon as they can resume their normal lives. Essentially, they're taking out rent loans. And if you can't get a loan to cover your loans, the banks will just take your house and sell it to the wealthy as a cheap investment. Don't worry, you might be able to rent your old house from your new landlord. The longer these lockdowns go on, the smaller the middle class and the larger the welfare class becomes. Food banks can't keep up with the demand from hungry Americans. Unemployment has skyrocketed. We are not talking about a recession. We are talking about a depression. We are talking about millions upon millions upon millions of Americans being enslaved to the banks in indentured servitude. The rich will only get richer. They have the extra capital to buy up your sold stocks for dirt cheap, buy up your foreclosed home for dirt cheap, and buy up your closed down small business for dirt cheap, all sold or lost because you desperately needed money to get you through this. That is capitalism, folks. It's a system where people who have the extra money to invest during economic downturns run off richer. Opening the economy back up isn't a capitalist idea. Keeping it closed is a capitalist dream. And that's just the money part. That's not even dipping into the fact our rights as people are being violated. Right now, it isn't legal to leave our own homes except for necessities. Is there no other way to flatten the curve but to force people? Why don't we incentivize people instead? Rather than force people to abandon their jobs and businesses while claiming, oh, don't worry, we'll figure out feeding your family and helping you economically later, as if our government has ever been efficient at either of those things, why are we not demanding they come up with a plan to encourage us to stay at home instead? They could say to the business owners, we will offer you XYZ financial package to keep you going if you close down. This gives the business owner the choice and incentive to close their doors for safety reasons. Because people are genuinely afraid of the virus, fewer people are going out anyway. Businesses would likely choose the financial package over staying open. Same for individuals. Rather than force us, the government could offer us the money and services to stay afloat if we choose to shelter in place instead. Again, because of the natural chilling the virus has created over society, most people would make this choice. But it needs to be a choice if we are to call ourselves a free society. A government that is truly for the people, of the people, and by the people, looks out for the people, all the while maintaining their essential freedoms and liberties. Right now, we are all being forced to shelter in place and beg for help. Now let's talk about
Yep. Forced to shelter and beg. Kind of sounds like the 9th century, you know. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Right? Then there's this young lady who I think is kind of cool.
Currently, Dr. Jerry is obtaining his genetics and...
No, not Dr. Jerry. So I'm just like flipping through the old...
Welcome, everybody. Wow,
What a treat.
Was brought by a woman, and I was told that to respect the women. There's an equal respect between a man and a woman in our tradition. So a lot of our traditions, our culture, orange. And that DNA connection is fascinating. If you study the Sumerian king list, even the Sumerian king list specifically says the kingship descended from the heavens, and you've got that connection. So, wow, what an honor. Let's talk about it. What's going on?
Wow, I mean, that's what we've kind of been dealing with, but
this is Laura Eisenhower,
is to look at where it comes into us,
great-granddaughter of Ike.
That maybe a part of ourselves is running the show, and it's not the best part of who we are, because it's not integrated. And it doesn't mean we're at fault. I mean, we have been assaulted. There's been a lot of wars that have taken place on a galactic level. We've sunk down in density. it's been very easy to take advantage of us, but we've always had positive forces trying to assist us, and these negative ones that just really hit the point home that we are in an experience of duality. So what can we do with that duality? Balance, integration, I would say, is the most important thing. So what's running the show has hooked into our ego, and it plays with our ego from the time we're, super young, so that we don't even question it. And that's what programmings are. It comes through all the different power structures that we're dealing with, but it's not just that. There's dark technologies that use planetary energies and put things in scrambled codes in order to create reversals so that we digress instead of, gracefully move into an organic ascension. So without all this interference, we probably would have gotten there a long time ago. So a huge part of what we're dealing with, which I attribute to the symbology of the tree of knowledge without the religious overlay, is that the tree of knowledge is the duality of, the concepts of good and evil and the imbalance of masculine and feminine, which breeds this level of duality of good and evil. And it's up to us to understand that that's actually a DNA imprint, and it's been targeted with mind control. And so the power structures have been feeding us the narrative, and it's made sure that it's diverse enough so that we don't all have an agreement about something, to the point where we're so conquered and divided that a new world order or one world government is going to emerge acting like it's oneness and blaming us for the division, when all these wars and all these things that we've learned through false history and rewritten history and not having the full history has made us very uncomfortable about one another. And so the true path right now is to understand that seeking knowledge needs to be self-knowledge first, or we'll never have the discernment or ability to restore our DNA, which symbolically and metaphorically is the tree of life.
The Tree of Life is fascinating. And I also wanted to let people know, because I don't know how long you've had this specific website. It's a great website. Folks, if you want to check out more about Laura, I mean, she's got some great podcasts up on her website, and it's at cosmicgaia.org, cosmicgaia.org. And I also just wanted to say thank you very much to my friends over at Noble Gold Investments. I was talking to Colin earlier today, and he's offering some opportunities for Leak Project listeners. If you just want some free books.
Yes. And that's the problem with leak projects, that basically a guy has pretty good people on it. He's got a good rip, so he gets good people. But he's always hawking gold and flashlights and supplements. He's like right up there with what's his name? And everybody's got to pay their bills. But as Laura's trying to tell us, we don't have to sell the farm. Uncle Pugnuts, good to see you. Crack on. Thank you, my friend. Your brother, Graham, is there. You're both Irishmen. And and I'm wearing my Irish look, the kind of crumply jacket. I know there are probably not many Irish old dudes left who look like this, but when I was young in Dublin in the late 60s, there was this whole crew of, what we would call in America anarchists or bohemians that were in the streets of Dublin talking to anybody who would listen, right, about really interesting things. And then there were the artists that used to make these amazing chalk drawings on the corners in front of where Trinity is. That's the old part of Ireland. And it had a business section, and now it's the trendy part of Dublin, the old part of Ireland, old part of Dublin. And, those houses, I don't know if they still do, but the English used to tax window size. So in Dublin, those old houses, the windows are like this big, because the bigger the window were, if you weren't an Englishman, you had to pay a tax for your window. Still do. So we're at this place. You heard Miss Eisenhower, and she is a trip. She is like on acid, dealing with the cosmos, because she is talking real truth. But, the people, I have to live in the real world. I have to pay my bills. Well, in a couple of weeks, no one is going to be able to pay their bills except for corporations, because they're getting bails. I mean, why are airlines getting bailed out? The capitalist society, if your business fails because you had poor planning, I mean, all these airlines have for the last 8-9 years had the highest profit, they've ever had. They should have been putting a little money away. And within weeks, they're begging, oh, we need a bailout. Ooh, they're not, keeping their employees there, like the lady before Miss Eisenhower was saying, maybe they should make rules, give money to businesses that will keep their employees and things. Yeah, maybe we should be giving most of the money, if our economy is based on small business, maybe those are the businesses we should be bailing out, not large corporations, that, cause these economic stressors, And we are going to very quickly, every week we seem to have a $2 or $3 trillion bailout for some large corporation, the airlines, the banks, and we let these people let our means of production go overseas. We don't even have a place to make, medicines, or anything, all of the, and the party line, because all those hospitals are corporations, they're telling their doctors to not be doctors but follow this protocol. If anyone comes in, period, they have the novel 19, and thank God chat did lately. Stock buybacks. Yeah, stock buybacks. Yeah. Jennifer, good to see you. Crack on. Yep. So, as Miss, Eisenhower was telling us, we are something that we're not told we are. Our history is totally a lie. We're supposed to be, oh, you've only been around 6,000 years. No, we've been around 1 billion years, right? And that's why I want to, I keep saying, hey, gang, let's meditate. Let's go into state. Let's go into our Akashic record and see what's going on. So we've been doing this now almost 30 minutes. So, and there's 4 of you here. So we're going to go into state, and I'm going to lead you into your Akashic record quickly, and I'll have you open it up and see what's going on, right? And you can chat if you want. You can do anything you want, And so get yourself in a comfortable position, relax, Breathe in that 20%. Breathe out. Breathe in. Yeah, breathe in the Father Sky. Have that prana go into your lungs. Have your heart pump the prana through your blood. And have you see your blood in your imaginary mirror. You see it spiraling through your veins and arteries and capillaries. And there's a swirl going clockwise, and inside that swirl, there's a swirl going counterclockwise, and inserted that one, there's one 90 degrees in parallax going counterclockwise. And what does that do? It makes your blood a scalar generator to connect to multi-dimensions, right? So when you go into state and you breathe in that prana goes to every cell. You see, your little mitochondria, and it's causing the RNA to split that cell in half, mitosis. And the only way that happens is that you are grounded to Mother Earth. So, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, so we will do no harm. See it clearly. And in that process, in every day and every way, we take the piece of the earth and we make it stronger to serve love's co-creation. See it clearly. And you ground it to Mother Earth through your chi. And Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for our sinners now and the hour of death. Amen. And Mother, Father, bless us indeed. Enlarge our territory. Put your hand upon our shoulder and keep us safe from evil. Keep us safe from evil, so we will do no harm, so we can balance ourselves, so we can be in presence, Yep. So,
ladies and gentlemen, on how to get out of the
Operating and pulling strings from behind the curtain, so to speak, creating wars, funding both sides of wars, creating a history that is put in our books where a huge portion is cut off, to then be targeted later with these so-called movements where we can even say, oh, that never happened, or this happened instead. We're still chasing our tail in a lot of ways. The truth is there have been a ton of Holocausts. There's been a ton of genocides. And basically it's to wipe out certain root races and certain starseed groups that are a part of holding a particular frequency that can help us to advance our DNA. Because ultimately unity consciousness is about sharing codes, sharing energies, and coming together. But we're all at war with each other. Everybody's taking everything personally and being offended by everything. We're still like in this disconnect that is being pushed on us so that we still argue and fight, when in actual fact, the more we come together, the more we are able to awaken dormant strands, and we each hold pieces of that for each other. And so that has been the whole idea behind a lot of these ET government treaties is barter and exchange. You give us humans, you allow us to abduct, we get their genetic information, and we'll give you a position of fame, money, power, whatever floats that individual's boat, or that the mindset of those that are being voted into office, celebrities, but it's all a part of these families, so it's been following this multi-generational patterning for a really long time. And they've been, directly interfacing with these beings for a long time. But when it started to hit the governments was when they would put pawns in the place or elect leaders or groom leaders. Now we're seeing, particularly after Kennedy, groom the leaders so that they would be easily used to run these agendas through. And pretty much after the Second World War and what Eisenhower was dealing with, that whole administration gives us a huge clue into the different projects and programs that took place to basically infiltrate the United States government and all secret space programs, and different things that were hidden, but only for our benefit to eventually be revealed, that got infiltrated to the point where revealing it would make one vulnerable to murder or some sort of being suicided, which we still see to this day. So infiltration is it's like a virus that is spread. And the ET government treaties, Phil Schneider talks about 1926. Keylontic Science says 1933. There's a lot of information around Roosevelt's time, and Hitler, Aleister Crowley, and Winston Churchill as being the first to make the deals as far as creating this barter system for the benefit of some, but not for all, which starts to create this whole concept of New World Order. They'll hoard the technologies. They'll have their condos on Mars. They have the opportunity to go into underground bases while they compromise the planet and generate these artificial timelines through the use of these technologies and social engineering and mind control to use this as a food source to then create whatever world they want to see. And I was a part of a recruitment in 2006 to go off planet, which opened the lid up for me to understand it to a pretty intricate degree, which is really hard to put into words in an interview. And I know a lot of people are like, well, give me proof, give me proof. Well, I got a whole slew of emails. I can name every single person that was involved. And I see what their public history has been. And I've studied a lot of them. And it goes back.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
It goes back to Project Paperclip and the Nazi agendas.
Do you think that they could have been just kind of pulling your leg when they were asking you those questions and trying to initiate you? Like it's an agenda-driven thing. They knew you would say no, and
I don't think they did think I would say no. But one always has to consider every angle. I'm the kind of person that doesn't want to have a fixed belief about anything, including the stuff I share. But that was quite a long time ago. 2006 was when it happened, and when I was in the midst of it.
So here's another interesting character.
Hello, everybody. It's Laura Eisenhower, and I have a really awesome guest today. Her name is Amanda Drain, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is a certified energy healing practitioner, a Reiki master, beyond quantum healing hypnosis practitioner, a spiritual counselor, a light worker, a starseed, a universal consciousness activator and facilitator. And Amanda has been working with clients since June of 2018 using a wide array of healing modalities, as well as creating light language meditation activation for her YouTube channel. Her website is incorporealhealing.com. Her YouTube channel is called 12D Light Language. And again, light, frequency, sound is the great activator of our DNA. And so
So most people who would see that, we go, wow, these people are totally wacko, totally nut jobs. I live in the real world. Well, in actuality, whatever you picked up on that few moments of that introduction, I used to do the same kind of healing that woman did. And nobody else was doing it in New York City in 1984. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, have the right teachers, the right exposure, and the right attitude, And I had a very down low practice, meaning I didn't really advertise. I didn't even charge money. There was no social media in those days, and closest thing we had was cable TV, and I used to do a show on Manhattan Cable called Potato Wolf, produced by an art organization we put together called Collaborative Artist Projects. So we were the first group to, go after grant money that was there through the National Endowment of the Arts. And we were the first to do it for the individual artist, Before then, that NEA money was for Jesse Helms of North Carolina. People could never believe this. He was the guy who pushed through the NEA because he wanted to show the commies that we had culture too. And that money was for basically, like I said, the opera, the ballet, rich people, symphonies, and schools too, to get younger people to go into those things. But the visual arts, not so much. Movies, yes, there's money for movies because it's, part of the business plan, and TV, yes, and etc. But poetry, not so much. Painting, sculpture, not so much, right? But we did, and and that's kind of what gave birth to Soho, because there were a group of us who were living in these lofts. Andy Warhol was the smartest of us all because he lived in a loft in Union Square, between 16th Street and 14th Street and 16th Street on the west side. Really beautiful building. And he called his, he had an LLC and called it, the factory. So when even though he lived there and, had his scene going on there, when the city came to inspect, it's a factory. This is a factory building anyway. So yeah, it's a factory. So he never got really Then he became famous and sold his silkscreen for thousands and millions. And he was trying to make a statement that art that was connected to your soul was being trespassed by folks of the advertising, because he came from advertising. And he understood the Tavistock Institute, which was started by, the cocaine addicted, tobacco addicted, Mr. Freud. And his nephew started basically Tavistock Institute, which during World War I perfected, propaganda, advertising, mind control, and all of that, which became, MK Ultra, came from that. And the kids of Truth Media did a great film called The Minds of Men that really lay it out. You go watch that one, and I won't play it for you. I just kind of play things that represent people and the energy of the situation at the moment, right? And here we are, right? And so you should still be kind of in state and kind of listening to this and looking at your Akashic record and saying, what's going on here? And if you got your book open and you have emptied all of your fear and anxiety into it and seen the perspective of what it is, thus allowing you to be freer, like these folks. These folks, they had no fear. This woman just had a baby. This lady just had a baby. That baby is right there on her tit, right? And that kid grew up like that. I mean, in weeks, he was running around. He had a halo around his head. Can you see the halo there? No, she's got his head under because she's got him hooked to her tit. But these people were unbelievable. I mean, so they came to me before I even knew I was having dreams about these guys, before I even knew I was going to Australia. And if you open your heart and you open your mind and you meditate, you breathe 20% in and out 30%, illuminate yourself with the prana of Father Sky and ground yourself to the chi of Mother Earth. You can do anything. You can see anything. That's what your Akashic record's there for, right? So let's see what you're saying. Let's say that's how Larry Summers is a good thief. Yep. Cadre will gather. Yep. Jamie Hillier. Esoteric Dragon. I don't know what that means. Charburger. Dragons are much needed. Yep. I'm a dragon by the Chinese horoscope, especially the ones that eat the village idiots. Oh. Why was it called Potato Wolf? Who knows? We were in Alan's loft, a little buzzed, and that was the name we came up with. Why we call it collaborative artist projects, because we were collaborating as artists in projects. At a zoot suit? No, you missed it, Dragon. I'm representing as a bohemian, Boop, 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 boop. Yep, exactly. So, Esoteric Dragon, Are you a warrior, monk, in love with truth? What is your truth, Dragon? Tell us your truth. Tell us about you, Dragon. Tell us what you're doing these days, Dragon. Where you living these days, Dragon? What are you doing with your community? What is your community? Tell us, Dragon. We want to know. Just trying to stay clean? You mean your perineum? You're just trying to clean your perineum? Have you bought 1,000 rolls of toilet paper? But I digress. The real issue is not whether you're clean, but how much love in your heart, how much respect for yourself, how much sharing and caring, how much are you ready to serve love's co-creation? Like I said, my wife and I lived out here, I'll show you our house. Yes. This is our house. That's what we lived in. There was a deep hole there, and there were no ant nests or any other kind of things. And we smudged it out, and then we built, from the trees and leaves and things, a roof over it. And we lived in that. And it kept us dry when it rained, actually, pretty good. And we had good drainage off the side. And is that clean enough for you? Could you live that way for a year, Dragon? We had no toilets, no running water, no toilet paper. Could you live that way? And here's a picture of my wife. Your average American girl growing up in the American way. And I brought her to Australia. She knew my friend who we were going to visit. And so she, they were buds. And here's her picture. Oh, that's me. And these people were the freest. Here she is. Look at my wife. Look how happy she is. This woman is the medicine woman and shaman of the crew, right? And look how happy she is. And we've been living out in the middle of nowhere. No toilet paper, no toilet, no shower, no real running water, living in a hole covered by grass. No bed, no sheets, no pillow, the same few clothes to wear, and more insects than you can ever believe. There's a picture of this woman who came from Perth, who was one of the experts on the Aborigines. And I took a picture of her back because she had about 300 insects crawling on her because she, was drinking Coca-Cola. She brought her own case of Coca-Cola, and she was eating Twinkies and chocolate bars, and the insects were eating her alive. Where is she? Oh, there's her back. I don't know if you can see it, but all of these are herds of insects crawling all over her back, right? And she just kept swatting them off, and she had a little spurter bottle of DDT. And she died of cancer like about 5 years after that. In the 50s, England and the United States set rockets in the troposphere, detonating hydrogen bombs in the upper atmosphere, blowing away the ozone. And that's what, it wasn't hairspray or CFCs that got rid of the ozone. It was, us detonating hydrogen bombs in the upper atmosphere. Let's see. I'm just trying to stay clean. Smudged. Yep. So we go way back. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It's like, I don't even know what that means, except that it is part of mind-controlled advertisement, that you have to, be addicted to a substance. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and if you've ever seen Cocoa Puffs, it's like chocolate-flavored styrofoam, So we're in, interesting times, a little deeper than Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And Dragon, have you been meditating? Have you been going into your Akashic record? Have you looked at your present, past, and future life? Do you have a sense of direction? Do you have a sense of service? And do you care what's going on? And what are you experiencing? Where are you and what are you experiencing? Are you locked down, or is your community not that locked down? Do you feel scared that you're going to get sick? Are you, worrying about that? Because this pandemic, it's obviously something, if you go to our friend Cliff Hyde, who's quite an interesting guy, let's see. I've just been watching of Cliffy there. There's David Icke and, Richie from Boston. And those guys are really, passionate about what is going on in their life, but they all have an opinion, right? And our brother Cliff, he's got his opinion, and it's a pretty interesting one. Yeah, our sister Kim Iverson, I really like her. She was the one who was. Here we go. He's going on about David Icke.
Okay, and the big clue.
Come on. There's Cliff.
Hello, it's 13th of April, 2020, 10 a.m. This is the second recording of the day, and then I'm going to go and get on to other work, which it relates to actually I have to do my aspect of the subject of the video here. So this is all about what they got wrong, why Kerry Cassidy's wrong, why Jason Four is wrong, why Jordan Sather is wrong, why David Wilcock is wrong, why David Icke is wrong, Alfred Lambermont Weber, all these conspiracy guys, why they're all wrong, what they've all missed. And also some of the normies like Tim Pool, why Tim Pool is wrong as well. Okay, so we have two issues. We're going to discuss these in a fairly straightforward, snappy little manner here. Lots of drawing on our board. So we have, oddly enough though, this is only one of our issues right here. The other issue is over there. Okay, so we can think of the bioweapon, what we'll call the CV, or there are other names for it. But that's a problem. And it creates illness and so on. And then there's all these conspiracies that are wrapped up around the illness. But that's really the smallest aspect of what we've got to deal with, the very smallest aspect. So this is problem number one here. And proportionately, it should only really be occupying this amount of the board right up there. Okay, so all of this stuff right here should be squished down into that little space, right?
And he's talking about the coronavirus, what I call
that little area.
novel
The
19.
rest of the board over here is to address the real problem, which is that civilization is broken. And if we think of civilization appropriately, we will come to the realization that Jean Baudrillard was quite correct. He's a post-Marxist French philosopher, and he's quite correct in being able to define civilization as a system of systems. And so the current civilization we're in right now was broken by the bioweapon on October 19, 2019. And that civilization had taken almost 50 years to progress from 1970 to 2020. And we called that civilization globalization. And it's broken. And it was a system of systems. It was a system of more than just a system of systems. It was a system metaphor applied over the top. It was a system plan, a system design applied over the top of all of the other systems. So this was the just-in-time inventory model that was applied to, and actually we should have a little tilde symbol there, that was applied to all of the other systems. So every system was invoking the just-in-time inventory system where you manufacture it, you basically store it in the transport until it arrives at the destination, where it's assembled into whatever it's supposed to be, and then that device or whatever it's supposed to be gets into another transport system, which is also its warehousing, and it's stored there until it gets in the hands of the consumer. So there's no warehousing, there's no inventory. So you start off with big piles of raw material here in trees or mines or whatever, big piles of raw material that then spend most of their life in.
So you guys can go to critical thinking and seek forth, right? So I just played a little bit of that just to give us a little diving board to go into what I've been talking about for, 2 years. We need to develop an alternative aesthetic, a different modus. And what he's talking about, how in the 70s when, Nixon and Henry Kissinger went to China, all they were doing was rebranding capitalism and not even Marxist capitalism. They were rebranding, geopolitical, what is known as in Russia, when oligarchs. We have oligarchic capitalism, So what would you replace this outmoded economic system with? Dragon, how about you? Why don't you chime in with a good feeling about what kind of economic system you'd like to see and how it might work? And you too, Jamie. What do you think? Do you have any ideas from your heart? Not something you read in a textbook, or how do you feel about your day-to-day life, and how would you want to see a civilization come about to manifest what Laura Eisenhower was talking about, the fact that we are entities a lot more galactic in nature? Now, Jamie Hilliard just said exactly, and I'd say if you were wrong, that's the number that came to mind immediately. What does that mean? How does that fit the context of trying to talk about an alternative aesthetic? Well, actually, it's not the survival of the fittest, because if it was, we wouldn't be giving bailouts to banks. They would fail because they're not the fittest. We would not be giving trillions of dollars to the airlines after them just making the most money in the last 3 years than they ever have. That is not survival of the fittest. What is that? Field is working. 1 to 10. What you say? Again, I find your responses enigmatic, meaning I don't understand. It's not like you're responding to what I'm saying. How about any of you others? These are just esoteric, and Dragon and Jamie Hillier have been basically for the last, I don't know, few chats here. How far back do we have to go before? Well, that's pretty much half of the chat has been monopolized by esoteric Dragon and Jamie Hilliard, and it almost looks like esoteric Dragon and Jamie Hilliard are the same character. Jamie Hilliard, what's crackling? The last somewhat cogent response was from Graham, who said that's how Larry Summers is a good thief, right? Because and that was the last that we talked about what we were talking about, Gotcha, will, potato, it's like, anyway, so, whoops. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So, anyone have anything to say that's cogent to the present situation? So, Cliff of Conscious Thinking was talking about, this, basic, novel 19, that's what I call it, was basically a biological weapon that was released, either through, incompetence or somebody thought it was a good idea to do it, right? And very much, we are experiencing the little, has anyone ever read Stephen King's The Stand? That is, basically what we're going through, right? It was on ABC TV. And it was basically the whole human race died down to two little groups, one in Boulder, Colorado, and one in Las Vegas. And the devil was in Las Vegas, and Mother Mary was in Boulder. And it was a conflict of good and evil. And as in the movie The Matrix, we have to come, as Laura Eisenhower was talking about, there's this duality in us that we have to come in balance. And that's what we are experiencing right now. We're having a situation live out right in front of us, and moving very quickly, where, you see the lines of all those people who were going to the food banks way. They have no food. And at the same time, the farms are having one, especially down in Florida, one of the largest kick-ass of wanting to basically harvest their crops. And because of the capitalist system, those crops were paid for or augmented to restaurants and the service industries, right? The entertainment industries that are basically dead. They're not coming back. Disneyland's not coming back. And the movies. I'm looking at all these trailers for movies in 2020 and 21. No one's going to go to the movies. Sorry, gang. And so all of those business models are dead, and China is dead. They are not coming. They let people out to go work in the factories again, and they're getting, sick again, right? So that's kind of proving that this is a bioweapon, because the bioweapon basically is thrown out into a public. It infects X amount of people. They get sick. Them getting sick takes a great deal of resources away from the civilization. And then they kind of, as you've been hearing, blunt the curve of, instead of going straight up. And, but once they let people out, they get reinfected. And not only that, there's 3 different types of this novel. There's A, B, and C. A, not so bad. And that's why at first they didn't notice it in China. It probably got out in August. And people had the A, and they just had kind of a cold. And there's about 13 million Chinese that go to the West Coast. So what's really interesting, the West Coast has novel 19A. The East Coast has novel 19B, which is the more virulent type, and that's why New York is getting hit. And Italy has novel 19C. And that's just in the space of September till now, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, right? And April. So 7.5 months, it is mutated 3 times. And it could have been engineered to mutate that many times, right? Because that would be also and that's why, if you go back and look at Cliff's videos, and he started talking about this back in early January. They're saying, hey, this is a bioweapon. And Cliff is, what he has spent his whole career of 60 or so years as a computer programmer. And what he programmed was, computer models, and he mostly worked for the Defense Department and corporations. And in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, he modeled nuclear war, biological war, and chemical war. And that's why he's, he, in one of his things, he put out as a JPEG the whole Army handbook on biological warfare, so you could read it at your leisure. And it was from the 1970s, so it had been you could go on, Defense Department websites and see it. That's where he got it. So he wasn't like he's spilling any beans. But, we are in a very interesting time. And I've been talking about, 2 years ago, I started off with, hey, we have to start looking at the alternative aesthetic. Okay, so someone along the line, so tell us a story about the old crone again, Okay, so back when I was, trying to help John Birmingham, and my 3 rules: doctor, do no harm, don't get involved unless you can see a positive exit strategy for the innocent, and 3, don't get involved unless you can learn something. So I did no harm because I did not act as a doctor. And the positive exit strategy was, I'm going to be there for my friend John and help him acclimate to the school, because there's a lot of energy in that place. That place, that hill, when George and Inga found themselves there, they had suffered the Holocaust of World War II. And then they couldn't come to America, so they had to go to, Argentina, where they met up with the Nazis again, and so before they could emigrate to America, right? And so they finally made it here in the late 50s, stayed in New York for about 2 years making money, doing portraits of rich people's dogs, and then, had some cash, and what George used to do, he used to, and this is why I tell you, if you want to watch some of my shows, get yourself a dartboard and throw darts and whatever 3 numbers you can get. Go look at that show, because I got over 1,000 shows, right? But George used to throw darts at not a dartboard, but a map of the continental United States. Wherever the dart landed, he'd put a little red pin. And the place that had the most red pins was Roanoke, Virginia. So once they got their grub stake together, they got themselves in a car and drove to Roanoke, Virginia, and rode around and found this place up in the mountains, and was just what Engel wanted. It was an old homestead of a farm. It was owned by, and up in that hill was where the Cherokees' most sacred place was. And there was a number of families of Black slaves that had married into the Cherokee. And so both those crews were hiding in plain sight, right, up in that hill, right? And they bought about 300 acres from this one family. There were 3 families up there. And they, and there was a homestead, and there was a road to the homestead. It was like almost a bicycle path. And so they, built, they fixed up the homestead, they fixed up the barn, and then they built the school, because that's how they wanted an art school. So they built the art school, right? And I gave John some flyers that George had made of the art school, and John kind of put them up on his channel. So I'm there, right? And I'm trying to lead by example. And John is like, wow, and that's because he's smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, other things. And he was, he's a Libra. So he was like doing this. Libras can, if they're in balance, Libras are the best. But when they're doing the seesaw, they are scary. And, John was scary. So, I'm not a doctor, so I did no harm. But I could lead by example, thus giving John an example of a positive exit strategy. And if there was anybody who was innocent, it was John Boy, right? And that whole thing that Miss Eisenhower was talking about, how people are these dualities and controlled by all these forces, that's definitely, John was straight up that guy, right? So I, would start talking to him, and I would listen to him and then talk to him and tell him stories and try to give him avenues where he could, get out of his laundry list, because he had, oh, I got to do this. Oh, and my parents, I hit them. It's everybody else's fault. I'm blah, 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 blah. No, oh, I'm like Jesus. He had this laundry list of saying the same thing over and over and over, 10, 15 times a day. He would go through and he would get more and more, and I was the only guy he could talk to, right? So, and he's, getting the place fixed up so his family can come and live there, which that's never going to happen, right? Now, the first year, his wife, or I should say his mother of his children, were living in one of his father's houses, and she wasn't paying rent or utilities, and they, his parents were trying to facilitate them somehow getting some, because he had 2 kids with her, right? And, in that first year that I was there, she was there, like 8 miles from our front door, right? And the only time he ever went to see those kids is when I took him. And the first time I took him there, oh, we're just going to go shopping, right? And then I drove him to that. And then I stopped and I rang the doorbell and she answered. And I said, hey, John's in the car. He wants to see the kids. And she was like fed up with the kids. She was ready to, oh, great. And she gave me the keys to her car. She goes, all their toys are in their car. Just go in my car. And so we drove down to the park, the skate, just down the road a bit where they could ride their bikes. And the car was full of skateboards and bikes and everything, right? And I basically, they were getting out and everybody was getting their smartphones in front of them. And I said, whoa, boys, why don't you leave your phones in the car and just go play, right? And they said, okay, And then I said to John, give me your phone and I will videotape you having fun with your kids. It'll be on your phone, right? And I also had my little camera out, my little phone, and I videotaped that, right? And what was so sad was these 2 kids. One was like, 8, and the other was like, no, one was like 7 and one was like 9, I think. And they were having a great time jumping in puddles and riding their bikes around and running around the baseball field and rolling down. I said, why don't you go to the top of that hill, roll down, got them to roll down. And John just kind of stood there like this. He was like the odd child out. And so anyway, as the time went by, I kept telling him stories because I'm a griot. You tell a story to give perspective and something that the individual, the listener, can kind of listen to. So he started videotaping my stories and didn't ask me, he just started doing it. And he started putting it up on his channel as his video without even saying who I was, just, right? And I didn't even notice because he was kind of doing it like, undercover. But then I kind of noticed him doing it. So I said, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm just, I've been videotaping you telling stories and the people really like it. And he was getting, his videos were getting maybe 100 people watching. He's been doing it since YouTube started. He's got, 500,000, subscribers, who knows. But that's because he was one of the first guys on there, right? And the only thing that ever went viral was his thing of doing Ronald McDonald, right? And so he was making some money off of that. And he knows the internet. He knows, I have no idea what I'm doing here. He knows how to monetize, all the rules, all the this, all of that, right? And so my stories started going viral, 60, 70, 100,000 people watching them. And you go, oh, tell the story about the old crow, right? So that story is, I met her at, I was sent off to study theater in Dublin at the National Theatre. And they looked at me and said, forget it, until you understand the Celtic motif. So we're going to send you to, Trinity and study, Celtic lore and Celtic history and all of the above. And so I met Archie, who was a really interesting guy, but he just kind of said, oh, look at you. So you need to read this book, this book, this book, and you need to be able to get into that library. Here you go. I'm giving you permission because I'm, a chaired scholar of this university, and I have the authority to. So you're, one of my students, right? So he took me under his wing, and he just kind of brought me in there, got me a carrel, gave them a list of books I needed to read, and I started reading them, right? And I would, have my little composition. He gave me a box of composition books, and I just started writing what I thought it was about, and then I would go talk to him about it, right? And we'd talk, and then we'd go down to the pub, have some schwan, and talk some more. And then about the third week, I'm in there doing, and I'm looking because I've, had exposure to a number of Madam Olga Kluver, Billy Kluver, Grandpa Stoll, Halley, a number of people who were truly, aesthetic adepts. And they were, again, showing, I was, their student, and they were just leading by example. And so a number of them told me how to look at things in a way that most people don't look at things, right? So that's what I was doing, looking at things in ways that people don't do it. And when the old crone, she came in looking like a homeless lady. She dressed in garbage bags and had a little, what they call a trolley, a little wheeled, carriage. And she had all this stuff in there. And, when she walked in, I just was like that. And she, what are you looking at? And the lady who is the librarian of that, sacred library, and a good part of it came from the Library of Alexandria. There's some real Hermetic books in there, and, real esoteric, real, mystery school stuff. But it's not laid out like a comic book. It's Hermetic tales are things that have codes in them. And before you can even get to the story, you have to understand the key to reading it, right? And I was turning the book around looking for the key, right? Because they're not right in the text. They're on the edge. They're in the this. They're in the... And that's when, if you go to my xratted.blogspot.com and read my novels, they're all coded. But they're, easy to break because I have little semicolons or those little starry things at each sentence that, and then there's the general directory that gives you the key to understand that sentence. But I'm just trying to teach you about Hermetic and mystery schools, right? And so she's like, and I'm like, and then I go back to my book and trying to look for the code, and she's coming closer and closer to me, not going anywhere else. She's coming straight at me. And she's like, what you looking at? And she's like standing right there. I could feel her breath on me. I could smell her. I could smell the, stuff in her cart. And she goes, oh, you're looking for the key. Aren't you a bright one? And I go, really? And because I'm only 19. And so, so she's like, so look at here and here and here. And then that one's first, second, third. And then with each page you look at, it changes. The one that was first is now second. The one that's third is now first. And she showed me the path to look for the keys, right? And then she kind of went away. And I said, wow. And I really, once she showed me that, it was like, dialing a phone, dialing for dollars, and I started seeing things I hadn't seen before, even though I thought I was pretty smart and I was picking up some stuff. No, that was all wrong. That was like just the face value. That's what Catholic priests would see. And so I redid it. And, anyway, I went back to Archie the next day after I went back to the library and got some more. And we had lunch. And he said, so you met the old crone? And I said, who? He said, the lady in the library showed you the keys. And I said, she's a crone? And I thought she was just a homeless lady. He said, no. She's like a queen, All of us who have been part of this path for a real long time, she is the leader. She's the one who leads by example, right? And she thought you were something special, right? And so she wants to take you to her farm, on the West Coast. And I said, well, I don't know. I was sent here, by people in New York who told me to do this, and then those people told me to do this, and now, the guy who's the seat of this school, he goes, don't worry about it. I've already talked to him. You go talk to him, right? So I went and knocked on his door and said, sir, and he goes, the old crone talked to you? I said, yep. She goes, I've known her 50 years. She's never said a word to me. And I said, well, she wants me. He goes, she wants you to go to her farm. Go. Forget this place. Go study with her. So that's how right? So Archie told me, okay, she's going to meet you in front of such and such, at Trinity, they have gates. And so to different schools, right? And so, they have the main gate that goes from the common and blah, blah, blah. But each of the different schools have different gates, right? And you can't, they got a guy there. Unless you are meant to be at that school, they don't let you in. Anyway, so I was staying, well, Archie had an apartment, and I kind of stayed at his place, but I had a little nook, like a shoebox of a room. And that's where, that was my place. I actually had a key. It was like having a large, in public school, they give you a locker. It's like having a large locker. You could sleep in the locker, right? So, I, got my little bag of clothes and stuff, and waited for her. And she was waiting for me. When I came, my Aunt Gracie made me a very punctual guy, and she said, Archie said she'll meet you at 10:30 down at the gate. So I'm there at, I'm walking out the door at 10:25, and she's waiting for me. But she's no longer in garbage bags. She's got a red Jaguar XKE, and she's wearing a red jumpsuit and has a big long scarf and has like a flight leather hat on. And she goes, jump in. And she takes off like, just, and this is a 12-cylinder car, and it is flying. And we're flying through Dublin, and we hit up a road, not out to the main drag, but up over and around a neighborhood, and we pop out the top of Dublin, and we're heading for, what's the name of the place? There's Dublin, and then up here, it's not Limerick, might be. It's known for its lace. Anyway, so bingo, we're shooting the back way into this place, and then we hit the main drag going up to the West Coast, and we fly from county to county, and we zip through. We hit the Ring of Kerry, and we go visit a friend of hers. We have lunch with this guy, and he is Korean or Japanese or Asian of some thing, but he's lived there since 40 years, right? And he's an artist and a poet and a bard. And he has he's an Asian guy with the heart of a bard, right? And so, bug nuts, just like Harold and Maude. Yes, I've had more than one of those relationships. And so we have a great lunch with him, and he's reading us his poetry, And about 1 o'clock, we jump back in her car and zip up, and we go past, Skibbereen, and just before Glendore, there's a road that shoots straight up. I mean, straight up. And it's kind of going towards Tipperary, but not really, but towards it. But straight up. And it's like being in a rocket ship. And I have a couple of pictures where I clicked, and it's going up this thing, and it's like one lane road. And if a car was coming down the other way, forget about it, because one side was a cliff and the other side was the mountain. And we were shooting up this thing, and luckily it was a straight line because you could see people coming at a distance. And so we're flying up this thing, and I go, do we need to go this fast? Because the cliff is right there, and she's on this side, and I'm like on the cliff side. And she goes, well, if there's another car coming down, I will have to back down, and I don't like backing down. So I want to get up this thing as fast as I can before anyone comes down. And I said, so how do you know that someone isn't coming down now? She goes, well, I'm just, and then she puts her foot on it. This thing's going 90 up a thing, and the cliff is like that far from and I just kind of said, okay, what would my master say? All things are as they should be, and everything's fine. Just breathe deep, remember to breathe. So I'm like sitting there trying to breathe and meditate while she's flying up this thing, and her scarf is flying back there. And she no longer looks like the old crone. She looks like she's, 21, I'm just like, and looking down over the cliff. And boom, we fly up to the top, and we come out on this little village, right? And there's a pub there, and the sign says highest, elevation pub in Ireland. And it's an old stone, with little windows because, they're taxed, and the rest of the houses around are what are known as beehives, round stoned buildings with thatched roofs, right? And they go down way deep because back in these things are really old, thousands of years old. And, first floor they build, right? And they would just throw their garbage out the window. Once the garbage got high enough, they built the floor, built another thing, and they kept doing that, And they were beehives, meaning the ground floor is very wide, and then the next floor is a little narrower, and a little narrower, a little narrower. And the top floor, which is like about the 6th to 10th floor, is, pretty narrow, and it's got a thatched hut. And so this village is all of those things, right? And when we were down in the Ring of Kerry, which are these peninsulas that stick out into the Atlantic, and it's really nice. They're about 60 miles long, and they're right next to each other. And if you go, there's a beach all along this, right? And so you stop here. That water's like a swimming pool because it's the Gulf of Mexico. The friggin' Ring of Kerry's got all these pine trees because the coconuts float over, hit the ground, and grow palm trees, right? So the west coast of Ireland is a lot different than the east coast. East coast is on the North Sea. It's always cold and rainy. West coast, sunny most of the time. It rains because it's an island and the weather goes flies by, right? Half the time it rains, the other half it's sunny. And you can move the clouds along. She taught me how to do that. So anyway, we stop off of that, and we have some nice little sandwiches, and he's always got a pot of some kind of stew on. And so we have a little bit of stew because that's her friend. It's also her post office, also the general store. It's like everything in one: pub, post office, general store, right? So she gets her mail, and she gets a few items to take up to the farm because she hadn't been up there for a while. And we drink some patties, and this is the best whiskey ever made. And we have a nice bowl of the stew this guy's made, and on really amazing, what do they call it? not oatmeal bread, but the Irish have a, and it's not, well, it's I forget what, but it's this really not like dark bread like Germans make, like a pumpernickel or a rye. It's a very grain. It's almost like beer, but bread, and it's you put, a sweet cream butter on it, and it's like, it's unbelievable, right? So this big bowl of sweet cream butter and jams, and slashing on and dunking it in the soup, and the best. So, we talked to that guy because it's just him and us, and his daughter is in the back, but she doesn't want to come out and talk to us. And so she's in there listening to the radio and, preparing things for the next few days and baking bread, and just leave me alone, right? She's a teenager. She don't want to talk to us. And so the guy, he's talking to us, and he's filling the old crone in on, what's been going on since she's been gone. She's been probably going a month or a few weeks. And him and his brother has been taking care of the animals up there. Not a problem. Everything's, and he goes, your farm takes care of itself. We go there and everything, we don't really have to do too much. The only thing we really have to do is milk the cow, right? It seems that no other animal has learned how to milk the cow. The dog doesn't, the horse doesn't, pigs don't milk the cow, but everybody else is like taking care of themselves. The chickens like roll the eggs out and put them in baskets. And anyway, and so he would basically go up there, milk the cow, milk the goat, and take the eggs, and he would take it to his, store and sell it, and that was cool because it was like a trade, he took care of the place when she was gone, and he got the goodies for it. So anyway, we have that, and we talked to him for about an hour, drink about 3 or 4 caps of good crack, and we have a little what is known as what do they call that stuff? It was all the desserts. Every week he would put them in this big bowl he had and put it in the fridge at the coldest spot where it didn't quite freeze, but it congealed. And he would mix it once or twice a day, and it would have cakes in it and creams in it and jams in it, and it was all mixed. It's right on the ambrosia. That's what he called it, ambrosia, and it was. And then he put it in one of those, like baked Alaska. He would put it in a thing that was that he made a baked Alaska, crust. He poured it into that, and then he put a lemon chiffon pudding on top of it, right? And then covered that in another layer. He kind of layered of the stuff that he had in the bowl. He put it in the baked Alaska thing, have a bottom of the ambrosia, then the lemon, ambrosia, lemon. Then he put another thing of the baked Alaska on top of that, and that much sweet whipping cream on top. And then had, jams drizzled on top with chocolate on top, and then shaved chocolate on top of that. And then he would cut a piece, and it would come out like a piece of cake. But if you let it, warm up, it would start to drool out. But so you and so that baked Alaska was amazing because it was like crunchy and sticky and sweet, and the lemon. So big slice of that for both of us, and a little more of the patties, and really strong. We had been drinking tea mostly with the patties, but before we went to dessert, he gave us like a super duper, almost Italian espresso. I mean, real wow kind of espresso. And so we drove up from the little hamlet up to her place. So it's this road goes up, and then it kind of flattened out into a valley. We drove, at least a good 15, 20 minutes, half an hour into this valley. And then we turned off a road, and I could see a lake over here, but the road took us through a forest. It was like the Danube. It was the darkest, it was like Vermont, dark forest. And the road, that was the only thing, was cut out in the forest. And it was like going through a tunnel. And the light was Limerick. It's got to be Limerick lace. And the light would be coming down and making all these patterns, right, all over the place. And we popped out of the forest into her farm, just right onto her farm. And the road kind of went up and went over, and the lake was over here, and it kind of went around the lake, and it went up and around, and there was a barn, farmhouse, big barn, and a bunch of little sheds, right? And the smaller barn was like the workshop, right? Big barn was for the animals, and the little sheds were stone, really old, and they were, like nurseries, right? And instead of having thatched roofs, they kind of had, one had glass, but the other two had, this is where I picked this one up. She had driven, rebar into between the stones, and then put PVC pipe over it, and then put plastic over that. And so these were all greenhouses, right? And where she was, having little things that she was going to put in her garden, right? And she had a big garden, about an acre, right? And she also had raised beds. In this whole acre, she had raised beds. And she said that, so she could really control the earth instead of just, running a plow over the earth. She built the earth in these raised beds. And it also, she didn't have it fenced in, but the raised bed was up at least a foot, and you could sit down too, And so it like gave a point of reference for all the field animals not to go eat her garden, right? So rated X version, not more like R. So we we pull in, and she says, okay, come on into the house. She shows me the house, and you go in, and there is a coat, you go in, and the entrance was more or less a coat room, where you can hang up your coats, kick off your boots. There's a place to sit down, kick off your boots, and you can have your house shoes in there, right? And she had her house shoes, and she had house shoes for guests. She goes, try some of those on, see what fits you. And take your shoes off, and in the house, you wear a house shoe. Okay. And so then she took me for the tour, right? So that thing went out into a vestibule that was pretty big, and there was a staircase off the vestibule that went upstairs. There was a door, a very large sliding door over here that went to a dining room and a kitchen over there. And the other side of the kitchen went up to a big, she called it the music room, but it was like a music hall. It was a big dance, heavy wooden floor, well sanded, polished up. It was for dancing, And there were, all along the edge of this were nice little place, couch and lounge chairs and lamps and tables and coffee tables. So groups of people could sit, and there were about 4 or 5 of those little groupings. And facing towards the south was a big opening that went into a library. So the dance hall and the library were almost the same. They were definitely 2 different rooms, but there was just a big opening. And that library was just shelves and books everywhere, right? And stacks of books on the floor, and 3 or 4 nice lounge areas where you could sit and read, a nice lamp, and big fireplace there. And in the dance hall, there was a big fireplace too. And it was against the kitchen wall. And that whole wall was stone. And so it was a big fireplace. And on the other side was a cooking fireplace and a wood stove. And all of the chimneys went into what she called a Swiss hot water heater. And she said she had seen this in Switzerland and in Sweden. And basically in that chimney that these fireplaces and wood stove went into were pipes. And the pipes went through it, and there was a tank at the top, and the cold water came in the bottom and went through where all the thing was going to be burnt. And there was this big tank that was on top, but it basically was the whole other side where there was another little fireplace. So if it was summertime and you wanted hot water, you didn't have to get everything cooking to make hot water. This thing was just for the hot water heater. And she actually had a gas stove and a gas burner underneath the hot water heater, right? So he really didn't have to make, and she had electricity, and I couldn't tell where the friggin' electricity came from. I said, where are the power lines? She goes, oh, I have a line that goes underground. And from where the last power pole I saw was down in that town to where her place was, that was 40 miles ago, So I had no idea where her electricity, but it never went out. We had all kinds of crazy storms. And she goes, yeah, it's underground. So, no. And I said, oh, okay. Remember, I'm an electrician. And I'm going, And she had a TV, she had a radio, she had a stereo, she had tape recorders. But she never really listened to the radio or watched the TV. She had it if she wanted to see something, she could see it, right? And I had no idea how the signals were getting to her. So, but anyway, she shows me the whole place. She says, well, I have a guest room, but I think you'll like the small barn because there's an apartment upstairs. And I think you like the small barn. You like what's in it. And she was right, because it was a workshop, you could fabricate almost anything, right? The only thing she didn't have was a Bridgeport. I mean, I couldn't cut, and I couldn't build a transmission. I could build almost anything else, and she had acetylene torches, and she had everything. She had a really nice shop. I could, she did have lathes. I could cut wood, and she had a, joiner. You could make anything out of wood. It was a metal shop and a mechanical shop. That's where she fixed her car. She fixed her own cars. She had a tractor. She had a little bulldozer. She had some pretty good equipment there. She had a backhoe. I mean, for late 1960s in the middle of nowhere, Ireland, she had a pretty well fitted out place, and everything was spick and span, spotless. But not like neurotic. But I mean, everything was in its place. Everything was right. So anyway, so she goes. There is the one thing about that place. There is no facilities. There's a dry hole in the back, but there is no facilities. If you want to take a shower, use the john or the bathtub, there's one in the little guest room. The little guest room has its own bathroom. So you can use both. When you want your own privacy, and that's that place. And if you want to hang out in the house and take a bath and use the kitchen and all of that and hang with me, that's your bed right there. So first night I slept in the guest room, and even though I went and looked at the apartment, it was really nice. It was a loft top of the little barn had great light, had two hay doors on either end that had sliding doors on them that you could, if you wanted to use as a hayloft, you could move them out of the way, but they were your basic, 1980s sliding, 1960s or whenever sliding glass doors were invented. She had one on either end, and it had screens, so you could open them up and get great breeze from both ends, and it had screens. So that was my first night there. We again had a nice little nosh before the night, and she goes, so tomorrow I'll have a whole bunch of things for you to do, right? And they will be, you'll have chores, you'll have studies, and then we will have walkabouts. I go, walkabouts? And she, yeah, that's more philosophic, esoteric, theologic, kind of walking about in our, our thoughts, right? And we'll walk through the woods, but it's a unstructured time of thought and study and discussion. And I said, okay. So wake up in the morning and she has a total Irish breakfast: eggs, sausage, blood, whatever that shit is, potatoes, and that's where I learned to love fried tomatoes. She would fry up tomatoes and other vegetables too. She'd have a couple of vegetables that she would saute up, and pancakes and waffles, and really, sturdy coffee, real coffee, right? She said, every morning you need to start out with coffee, then you turn to tea, right? So, we have our breakfast, and she has got, again, she hands me this little book, and it's got every day, for a month or two, right? And it's, gives the first day the chores, go cut wood, go, there is a number of, in the farm building where the animals are, there's some electrical issues. Here they are, go check them out, see what you think. We'll talk about it, and then you can fix it, right? So, okay. And when I go see the pile of wood she wants me to cut, it's like, really? Because she's got like time limits on it, right? And she goes, oh, and she says, come on back. And so we go into the barn, the little barn, and there's a little kitchen. There's a fridge, there's a hot plate, and there is a place where, a cupboard with a whole bunch. So she takes down a can, and she, there's one cast iron pot, and she measures, some in there and puts it in a tea thing and pours, boils, she's got one of these electric, they got 220. You push the button, man, it boil the water like that, right? So she's got the boiling water. She pours it through the strainer into the cast iron pot, and it has maybe 4 cups of tea, big mugs, right, in there. And she puts that on a little electric heating thing to keep it hot, right? So she goes, pours me a thing. Here, drink that. I drink that. It's a little bitter. And I go, wow, what is this? And she goes, it'll make you a good worker. And then she gives me another one, and she squeezes some lemon in it and puts some of her honey in it. She says, drink this. So, wow, that's really tasty. I like that. So she takes the rest of that lemon, squeezes it in the pot, puts a big drizzle of honey in there, mixes it up, and pours it into a thermos. And she goes, go out there to and start cutting up that wood. And here's some gloves. You're going to need gloves. And here I've sharpened this axe. And after you cut this wood, we'll sharpen the axe again, and I'll show you how to sharpen an axe. And so I go out there, and before 11, I cut that whole freaking pile. And I've never really chopped wood. That was never something I did. And she takes me out there, and she shows me how to swing the axe, right? To, make the axe do all the work. You don't have to do the work, right? let gravity and the axe do the work, right? So I'm drinking the tea, and she showed me how to do it. And this old lady, she now looks, maybe 60 something, not 20 something, and she's like, within 5 minutes, she is whacked into 10 logs, each into 3 nice burnable. So that's how big they should be. Here's a thing to put the wood in, right, to age it, right. So there's the big thing of logs. Smack that up just like I did that. Put it on that pile there. Cover it up with this tarp, and then come on in. So I do that, and by 11, I cut the whole friggin' thing. I started at around 8:30, and after breakfast, and 8:30 to 11, 2 cords of wood. Who to believe that? And so, and I feel good, man. I feel I feel really good. I feel strong. I feel like, yeah. Anyway, so I come in, and she's smoking her pipe, right? She goes, "Come here, sit down. Here's another pot of tea. It's the same stuff. I like that stuff. That makes me feel really good. I feel like no. Here." and this is like, I'm Italian, and there's a liqueur called lemon jello. And this was hot pepperminty lemon jello. It's like, whoa, what is that? Licorice? What is that? Is that mullein? Is that, And she goes, "Well, you're pretty good. You know your herbs." And I said, "A little bit, And, that's what I want to learn from you, more of that." So she goes, "Oh, you'll learn that." So we drink that. And then she lights her pipe. She has one of these clay pipes, and she takes a big drag on it, right? Does the whole thing. And I'm waiting for her to pass me the pipe because I can smell what she's smoking. And she goes over and picks out a little pipe, and she goes, "This is yours." And I look at it. It's never been used, right? It's whiter than white, right? Another clay pipe. So she packs it for me, and she goes, "Here you go." And whoa, that's, and she has these, big wooden matches about this long, really sturdy, like little 2x4s. They don't break. And, got the white hat, so you can that, or just rub it along the stone. And, yeah. And so we're puffing on. We both have 2 bowls, and we drink that whole pot of lemon jello, right? And now I'm no longer feeling like, yeah, I'm like thinking really thoughtful stuff, right? And I'm got my pop. I get up and I walking around, and she's got books everywhere, not just the library, but everywhere. Wherever she's sitting, she's got a pile of books. And I'm like looking at, "Oh, look at this." And so, "What's this one about?" And we start talking about this book, that book. And then she has a book that's, about the Kabbalah in Hebrew, right? And she goes, "So do you read Hebrew?" And I said, "Well, a little bit, I've had a couple of teachers kind of." And she goes, "How about Latin?" I said, "A little bit more of that. I've hung out with priests." So, and she goes, "What kind?" "Not Jesuits." I said, "No, Maryknoll." "Oh," she goes, "Those guys are great. Those guys, they're not even Catholic priests. They're wise men. They're I love those guys." And I say, "Yeah, I did too, But I was only like 6 when I hung out with those guys, 6, 7, and then I moved on. And so we're swapping stories, her childhood, my childhood. The book we're, talking about intuition, about letting yourself see things without pre-expectations, no expectations. Your connection is unstable. Please wait while we try reconnecting. So I'm talking about interesting stuff, and that happens, right? And there's only 2 of you, Uncle Fugnuts and AI. So anyway, we're going on about intuition and how to, instead of believing in something, having faith in it, right? And leading by example rather than waiting for someone to tell you what to do. Being yourself rather than being popular, right? So I told this story to John to like give him inspiration into this, right? And if you go back, if his channel's even still up, I haven't really looked at John's channel in at least since September. Really haven't looked at it. And maybe Christmas. Whenever he, there's a point I just stopped looking at it. And because he was doing the same thing over and over, listen to this great song, he talked, anyway. And that's why I kind of let John, go on the back burner, because no matter what I did, no matter how I tried, and if you go look at those early first 20 or 30 shows that I did, which he probably made $5,000-6,000 off of, because he was monetizing every single thing he could. And those shows were, they're up in the 70,000 view, each of those shows. The Jimi Hendrix show, the Old Crone show, David Bowie, JFK, Scargirl, all, about 20. And then he kicked me out because he was getting jealous that everybody wanted him to shut up and just listen to my story. So he kicked me out. And that's when I went downtown and lived in the transsexual neighborhood of Roanoke, Virginia. And I lived in a transsexual house, and I was working as a church's action coordinator, community action coordinator. And they didn't pay me a nickel, and I, put their little church on the got it popular. Because what happened was, it was all full of old people. It was a beautiful old church. And one year, 2000 whatever, pretty much half the church died. Everybody was over 70 years old. They had about 80 old folk who had been in that church for, at least 50 years. And then one winter, bingo, 40 of them died. And the board or whatever realized that they needed to, because it was an old church, one of the oldest churches in Roanoke, and they wanted to find a young minister to take over and bring new blood into the place, right? So there was this guy I knew, Tim, and he and I were involved in a lot of social activism, and he and I were not the usual suspects. We would come and try to get something happening, and people would just do the same blah, blah, blah over and over again. So anyway, so he got this gig, and he had a nonprofit, and it fit really good for him because he could ease his nonprofit into that church, still make the bucks he made from that separately from the church, and the church was going to give him a nice salary and give him a church, right? And he wasn't an ordained minister either. He had just been working in Christian, social activism, I guess. And so anyway, he says, I need you, And this is just when John threw me out for being more popular than he was on his own channel. And so, get out. And he had a hammer in his hair. He was like swinging, get out. And, that's kind of when I left. And that was when he had his Moscow mail order bride show up. And, he was all freaked out that she would like me more than him. And that's one of the reasons why, they showed up, and I made him, it was Valentine's Day when he showed up with this girl. He went to the airport to pick her up. And I made him a beautiful chicken dinner with all kinds of vegetables and wine, and I baked him dessert. It was Valentine's Day, and he had driven her, she had been on the airplane for like 40 hours. She was starving, and he didn't want to stop at a restaurant because he he's too nervous to go in a restaurant, all those people looking at him. So he made her drive, another 4 hours from DC to the school, and she hadn't eaten anything in like 2.5 days. And I had this chicken dinner with cabbage and all the stuff a Russian would like. And she walked in, and she almost started to cry. And I had the table set, and and I was the waiter. I didn't eat with them. I just kept bringing the courses in. I had a soup, and I had bread, really nice bread. I went and got really crusty bread and really good butter. And so the bread sliced big and thick, and the butter in a big bowl. And I brought a cabbage soup with sour cream. And she was like, whoa, just eating it like going nuts. And John was like scared of the food, right? You didn't spit in it, did you? Did you piss in it? You didn't. And, he's being like that. And I'm just being the waiter, right? And, then I bring the chicken with potatoes and more cabbage and carrots. And she's almost crying. And a bottle of wine. I keep pouring the wine for them. And he doesn't eat anything, right? But she eats everything because she is starving. And then I send them upstairs with a bottle of champagne and chocolates, right? To consummate their thing, right? And so, the next morning, I'm in bed, and he kicks the door. You gotta get up. You gotta go. You gotta. And he's like got this hammer in his hand, and I'm just kind of going, but get out. And so I put some things in garbage bags, and get in my car and drive away. Right? And it's wintertime. It's February, and I go down. I got no place to go, and it's like a Monday, so I decide, you know what? I'm going to go visit Tim. He's got this new church, and so I drive in and get out, ring the doorbell. He comes. He goes, "Oh wow, great, come here." And he goes, "I really need you." And I say, "What?" He says, "Oh yeah, I'm over my head. I really need, and I need to really be the community pastor, and I can't do it. I'm just do my nonprofit thing, and I've got these people, and they're driving me nuts, and I can't do it, and I need you to." And what had happened is because of his nonprofit in this church, Vista gave him a number of Vista workers who were like incompetent to they were the starting of the deep state. They just graduated college, and they sent them off to him, and they can't do anything without being in the Vista bureaucracy. So I basically sit everyone down and listen to all their stories and say, okay, this is, you got to be able to do this, and you got to be able to do that. And so basically I was HR, Then, after a week of that, I basically said, okay, I say to Tim, I said, so now, this is an amazing building. There's a sanctuary. They had underneath the sanctuary was like a restaurant. They could seat actually 500 people and feed them. And I said, we need to make this into a place where people can come and feel safe, right? A no fear cafe. And he goes, oh, that's a great idea. And so, that's in the back of my mind. So I'm every day, and there was a guy who worked at the food pantry, not in that church, but in another place. And he would get food for this one. He would just kind of stock the place up, but not, when they had an event, they'd make something. And he thought he was a cook. He was in the army, and he was like the guy who ordered the cans of food, and he thought it was, anyway. So and he was kind of very rigid, and I got to be his buddy, not by telling him what to do, but just saying, wow, you do a great job, blah, blah, blah. And so we got volunteers from Tim's nonprofit to go, unload the trucks, and that's, he was selling. All these colleges wanted their kids to have a community involvement, right? So they come around from the East Coast, from all these colleges, stay 4 or 5 days, and all they do is unload trucks and stack the cans, and that was called community service, and that was to check off the box in their college education. And the other thing he would do is take them down to the United Way, and they'd watch a movie, and they'd get another check. And that's not being in service. And by this time, I was already working with other churches of really poor people of color. And there was this one lady who was like a saint, and she started a thing called the Hope Center because there was no hope in that neighborhood. There was no place that, people were starving to death on the street. So she rented, a place that was in a crappy neighborhood, and she had daycare there. She had clothes for people. She showed them how to dress, how to fill out applications, how to use a computer. And kids would come from school, and when the parents were working, the bus would drop them off at 3, and they would stay there until the parents, basically picked them up anytime between like 4 and 7. 7, they had to go. And we made them a meal in the afternoon, a snack first, and then a real meal, a hot meal, soup or whatever. And so I started bringing the college kids, instead of just stacking cans, to hang out with these kids. And this was in the middle of the hood. On that street, all the girls walking on the street were prostitutes. All the guys kind of leaning against the wall in the alleys were selling drugs. This was, the real deal. And these kids were coming from, basically extremely bourgeois, white orient. Even if they were people of color, they were white people, right? That was their socioeconomic group. And that's the interesting that's happening in this thing with this novel 19, is that, man, everyone in America is going to learn what it's like to be poor. And, these places out where it's really hit them, where there's 10,000 cars waiting to get food from a food pantry, and this food pantry is used to 300 people every other week, and now there's 10,000 people waiting online every freaking day. They are not prepared, right? And the poor people, and I watched this on TV, this one guy said, who was working there, he said, this is nuts because most of the people who volunteer for this are old, and the old people aren't coming. They don't want to get sick and die. So they're not coming. So it's now half the staff that normally was here, and we now have 20 times more people showing. Normally we have 200 people. Now it's 10,000. It's like off the hook. And he goes, he's talking, and I'm talking to people in the cars wanting food, and they're all people who had, jobs, middle class, they worked for, this company or that company, making, 60 grand a year. And now then, they haven't had a paycheck in 3 weeks. I haven't seen anything. They can't get online to get, job insurance payments, whatever they call that, when unemployment insurance. And there's no money there for that because we've given all the money to the corporate, through the banks and the airlines and the Disney and all of those, right? We've given $12 trillion in the last 3 weeks to, and when the first one came out, they wanted to give that much money in one shot and not have any tell the Congress where the money was going to go, who was going to get it, and how they were going to pay it back, And they at least got it to the point where allegedly we're supposed to know where the money's going. Do we know? No, not quite. So this is going to be an interesting time, y'all, and there's 3 of you there. Okay. Here we go. Here, watch this one.
To come through me tonight, and it has to do with a message I would like to send to folks like Bill Gates. I could put a huge list together of order. I'm talking to those that have been manipulating and abusing the human population. I am talking to those that are wrapped up in some sort of covenant with some demonic forces to do all you can to establish further world domination for yourselves and enslavement for the rest of the human race. First off, this is a violation of free will. It's a violation of cosmic and natural law. Yes, we understand the need to play a dark role, but you're taking it way too far. And this is a time on the planet right now where the mother energy and the mother earth planetary consciousness holds true dominion. You do not have the right to do what you're doing. We do not consent. And millions of people have opened their minds up to the research and experiences of many who have uncovered the lies, the deceptions, and the evil corruption and these acts of just the most criminal activity, while supporting putting those in compromised situations that have not even remotely done close to the evils that are being done. It is in violation of cosmic and natural law, and it does not work, and it will not work. You cannot own us, you cannot have us, you cannot control us. And this isn't about smearing, this isn't about being defamatory, this isn't about something political. This is about crimes against humanity, and it is not acceptable. I am a part of the Eisenhower family. My great-grandfather sat in the presidential office for 8 years. He had contact experience with all different types of extraterrestrials, both malevolent and benevolent. There have been all sorts of projects that came into the American government and infiltrated most of these power centers and the secret space programs. Our hard work and money and tax dollars are supporting all these different projects and false flag agendas to basically screw us over. And the thing is, it's not going to work. So I have been with my great-grandfather since I was a child, in a spirit connection on a telepathic level. And the people are going to decide. And we are taking a stand. You do not have any rights to our bodies, to our health. It's obvious this is bioweaponry. It's obvious the vaccinations are to surveillance us, monitor us, and control us. I mean, to think that you can get away with this at this point is absurd. The powers of cosmic and natural law and creation are opposed to this anti-life agenda. And there are greater powers at work that will not allow you to get away with this. So what is coming through right now is just really, I guess, some pity that you would want to play the dark role to such an extreme that you will literally be stuck in a karmic loop for God knows how long. So it looks like you need the AI and transhumanism to keep up a life cycle, working with draconian beings and trying to genetically modify the human race to become worker slaves, coming from somewhat hybrid Anunnaki faction. There's a lot of information about the galactic history behind DNA manipulation and trying to separate us from true source, 0-point unified field. Those gateways are opening. You are trying to keep those gateways closed, and it's not going to work. So these agreements are basically utilizing this dark technology to harvest our energies because you're parasites and vampires. And so these are the facts, or about as close to the facts as I can possibly get, but all the information is out there. And if my great-grandfather was able to take the position of presidency and also was a general in the Second World War and had to deal with the manipulation and shutdown of disclosure and truth coming out so that all this could still operate behind the scenes with the trickery of fake news and false flags and mind control and dark technologies to socially engineer us, all of this is coming out. I feel sorry for you to a certain degree, but I don't even know if there's a soul in there. And I just hope that you can recognize the levels of violations that you are committing, which will be taken to a greater cosmic courtroom. So whatever you're trying to do here to the human race, there are multi-dimensions to who we are. And there's a much larger picture that you're going to have to face. And you violate the sovereignty and free will of any human any more than you already have. It's just going to dig yourself deeper and deeper into a hell you will not be able to escape. I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like for you. I don't know if you're actually human, but the deal is that to try and separate us from source and our divine birthright and target the human race in this way is not in agreement to the unconditional loving source energy that we all come from. It is only coming from fallen groups that have compromised their DNA and rely on humanity for a food source and prey on the innocent and steal their essence and fluids through torture and abuse. So there's a lot of you out there, and you're not able to get away with this anymore. The messages are going to get stronger and stronger the more you attempt to continue these dark agendas. Documentaries are coming out. There are multiple news channels, and you can try and censor till you're blue in the face, but there are certain things that you absolutely cannot access. No matter how much you try and manipulate human DNA, there are some things that you cannot access, and it's a greater power than what you hold. Your only power is trickery and deception and being able to fool the human race. But they are rapidly waking up in the face of seeing the bigger picture of what this is all about. And a lot of people aren't ready for it. But on a cosmic and galactic level and earthly level, we are in a window right now where your agendas are being overthrown and the true essence of light is coming in. And people are going to remember who they truly are and break free of the nets and the abuses of nanotechnology, weather modification, and chemtrails, and all these heavy metals that we have been inhaling against our will. Nobody voted you into office either. Nobody has elected these cabal members, these Illuminati members. We have a president right now that many are in support of, because he seems to be a president that's taking down human trafficking. We can only hope for the best. But just as much as you think that you can all of a sudden put shots in our arms to create ownership, to use us as a food source, something else is coming in that will absolutely disable your ability to do so. Because we do not consent, we are sovereign beings, and this is a violation to the codes of creation. And those that have passed over that are watching this, and those of us that operate in the multidimensional, will make sure that you do not succeed. And there are armies of light beings that you are not able to reach that will offset these dark agendas that are rising out of the hearts of humans. Our unity consciousness is going to increase as all these world wars have tried to conquer and divide us, all this infiltration, all this darkness. This has been a huge catalyst for our growth, so we thank you for that. But you're going too far. Quit with these abuses. It is absolute violation of everything. You are destroying the most sacred things. And it's shameful. So you don't run the show here on Earth. Mother Earth holds dominion, so does Spirit. And the power that we're reclaiming as humans as it grows, will absolutely hold you accountable and others like you to think that you can tinker with the human race in the way that you are doing. So I had to just let that out.
And she did.
Hopefully you can find a soul, you can find a heart.
And that's what's pretty amazing about that young lady, is that you may go, whoa, you know, I live in the real world. You know, I got to pay my bills. Well, good luck with that. Let's see how good you're doing with paying your bills. You know, and no matter what point of view you have towards what she just said, we are in a place where humanity hasn't really been before. You're still here, Uncle Fugnut's good man. So what'd you think of that, Miss Eisenhower there? And you know, again, I started this off 2 years ago. You know, this coming May 8th, which is, you know, a couple weeks from now, will be 2 years, right? That I've had Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob, right? I have over 1,000 shows up on the channel, right? I look at some people's channels, you know, been here since 2010 and don't have a single show, which is fine, you know, then, you know, why'd you have a YouTube channel, right? I'm here to serve love's co-creation, you know, and all of the stuff that we're going through and have gone through, as one of my masters, one of my teachers would say, all things are as they should be, you know? And coffee. So what do you guys have to say about that? You know, we've just covered a myriad of things, you know. We looked at Uncle Cliff, and Cliff is really good, you know, clear thinking. And he really takes it apart and shows how this is a, you know, bioweapon, and whether it was, you know, released on purpose or released by incompetence, it's been released, and it's a bioweapon, and it's going through its bioweapon path, right? So, I mean, it's going to be with us, you know, for all, you know, it's going to be like influenza, you know, influenza is something that's been with us, you know, for a long time, hundreds of years, right? And every year, the strain is a little different. Sometimes we're lucky, and sometimes we're not so lucky, right? And, you know, I am no expert. I've been just watching a lot of different people with lots of different opinions, you know, and and I don't even know if Cliff is right. But what I do like about Cliff is that he doesn't just drone on the same thing. You know, his story, you know, he started out with, hey, this is a biological weapon and it seems to be doing this. And I spent a number of years you know, Yep, wake up. And you have to go from your internal self, your heart, you know, not what you believe, what you have faith in, right? And so you go with that, you know, and always be kind, always be empathetic, always be generous. Never give up and never give in. Always serve love's co-creation, right? So, boop, doo, 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 doo. So that's the issue, you know. Are you going to get stuck in your ego? And, you know, do you think this is all about you? You know, who do you serve? Right? And the bottom line is, and, you know, I'm not perfect. You know, I constantly tell you, don't believe anything I say. And I keep saying, you need to, you know, you're here to ascend your conscious free will. You're not here to prove anything. You're not here to win anything. You're not here to be liked, or, you know, you're not here to become rich, powerful, you know, to own anything, you know. I mean, owning things, you know, all of those things are okay if they're a tool to be used to better humanity's position in the spiritual world. You know, it's your spiritual world which is the thing that matters, right? And not this illusion of a material world. The only thing that exists is love's co-creation. That's it. Everything else is an illusion. And it's an illusion that we were put in. You know, if you go study the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, those are tools, you know, for us to ascend our consciousness, to be, to go home to love's co-creation, you know. And we can only do that through the spirit of Father Sky, bringing in his prana, connecting it to Mother Earth's chi, connecting, grounding out in that chi, you know. And that's what we're here for. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, you know. Anything else is a waste of time, right? And what it does is it creates this dominance of division, of separation from love's co-creation. And that's why we have this, Sister Eisenhower just laid it out very nicely. That's what's going on, you know, in the material, in the spiritual, in the multiple planes of reality, you know. And again, you know, people who do terrible things, it's almost irrelevant, you know. What's relevant is the space that is created through your faith in love's co-creation to ascend our conscious free wills, right? And we are all our relations. You know, there's no separation, no good people, bad people, you know, rich people, poor people. We're all our relations, you know. There's no one that should be looked down upon, no one that who can be cut out of the herd and said they're expendable, right? You know, we can eat their flesh, you know. That's why, you know, eating meat, you know, I'm a meat eater, but with my present situation, my food sources are, you know, I don't eat meat, you know, or not as much as I used to, you know. My proteins are, vegetable and eggs and cheese, you know, and a little fish or chicken, you know. But even those are going to not be around. And, you know, I'm going to be mostly eating the berries and the mushrooms and the bark and the plants. There are all these really great plants that are just like lettuce. And what's really amazing is that they grow in a plethora around all of the paths in the deep green. Right? Not so much out in the deep forest, but where I cleared out a path years ago to walk around the deep green. All along it are these things, and I just go with my little basket, and when they become really big and leafy, I just clip them off, clean them off, eat them with a little balsamic vinegar and a little olive oil and a few seasonings, and they're very tasty. So that has become my diet, and it, you know, may have to become your diet, because part of Carrot Head's thing of, you know, keeping all those people from south of the border, those were the people who picked all our food. Those were the people who worked in all of those meat packing facilities. No longer are there white. It's illegal aliens in there. So now they're scared to even come out. So and a lot of them got sick, and so they're just and so the biggest pork packing facility in the United States had to close down. So within a few months, there's not going to be any real fresh vegetables, and there's not going to be any real. They in Florida, which is one of the largest producers of vegetables in America, is plowing in this season. Just because they're going to get, and most of these farms are large corporate farms. The smaller farms, those farmers are human beings, and so what they're doing is trying to bring people from churches and poor people to come and pick that stuff and take it out to the people who are hungry, but not the corporate farms. They're those big corporate farms are plowing all of this bounty into the ground, which will help the ground, because they will get corporate bailout money if they do that. If they destroy the food, they will get money from the federal government. If they give the food away, they won't get money from but the individual farmers, they're not going for the money, they're giving it to so there's the duality, right? Here's, farmers who've been farmers for generations and believe in feeding the people, and then there's the corporations who are all about profit, right? So here are these guys who could plow their, few hundred acres into the ground and get a few $1,000s, but they're not going to do that. They give the food as best they can to the poor and the churches in their neighborhoods. Whereas the corporate guys plow it in the ground and they're going to get millions, right? And so by summertime, fall time, winter time, there's going to be no fresh food whatsoever. Better enjoy it now. And luckily for me, I live in there are things that actually grow in the winter around here, And so, I'm pretty much set. I have some very nice neighbors. We try to hang together and watch out for each other. And the land around here is not, because it can't be. I'm very lucky. I live in this 200 square mile appellation of severe poverty. So these are, Sawtooth Mountains, and so there is no big farms. About 20 miles from me, where the valley is, there were big farms, and now this, Bayer Corporation owns it and grows only genetically modified crops. It used to be the vegetable capital. Del Monte and the other large frozen food guys all had factories here. Everybody here in the 50s, 60s, and 70s had jobs where they were making 12 to 15 bucks an hour in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's how much money the frozen guys were making, right? And this was the bean capital of the world. And when that was switched into Florida, California, and the different other regions, the specialties were cut out. And so Bayer, through Monsanto, bought this valley, bought up all those little farms, and all they grow is feed corn for cattle, soybeans, and tobacco, and Christmas trees. And they've destroyed the valley because they just covered it in, Roundup and other chemicals and GMO seeds. And the feed corn is sick because it grows and it dries out as it grows. And they leave it on the stalk, and they have these machines come in and chop everything down. I mean, the husk, the corn, everything is turned into feed, everything. And so they get two crops, and when they chomp it up in the machine, and they've got, a few thousand acres in that valley doing these crops. And so, and they never rotate them, meaning they grow tobacco in the same field that's killing it. They're growing it in the soybeans and it's killing it, and the feed corn. But the feed corn goes right by the county road. So you can pull a husk down and break it open. And when you break it open, it's blood red. Those corn, instead of being yellow and sweet, you break it and it's blood red. And if you taste it, it tastes like metal. This is what Miss Eisenhower, Sister Eisenhower, was talking about. Everything within the corporate structure is out to do this, satanic. I don't even know what to call it. That's why I played that riff of hers, because she said it much better than I, right? And there's 3 of you left. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. And when it hits 2 hours, 42 minutes and 22 seconds, I'm going to sign off. And I'll do one in the morning. And I'll do as many of these as I can do until I can't do them anymore, right? So, like I said, you should go get your thumb drives and your things. And, the folks who come on as trolls and try to, they can't communicate. They can't express themselves with love. They say non sequiturs and things that make no sense and disrupt the flow of the chat. And that's why I've decided, I said this is a no wrench place, but it's either the same person or the same type of person who comes on and trolls. And so as soon as they represent that motif, that they can't really bring anything of value to the conversation, I'm just going to, and because we're past the beginning part of this, we're going into serious time, right? And like I said, it's we're on the countdown. We got 10 months of the open window, and it's going to come to a head, And you saw the videos of Richie from Boston, and he's showing all the. I mean, he's really saying, hey, martial law, blah blah blah. They're coming after us, right? And he shows, all these people have their opinion on this, right? Cliff of conscious thought, he's got his thing, and all of them have their value. You can't look at them and say that guy's right and this guy's wrong. They all have a value to be looked at, and I only put stuff up that has an energy, that has an integrity, that was represented by these folks, right? These folks who were genocide in the early 70s, their whole tribe, their whole family was basically wiped out, 900 folks. And they went around. I mean, they weren't all standing in one place. They had to go around and just blow their brains out. And that's what they did. They just drove around, found, Aboriginal, and just stopped, got out of the car, walked up to them, took their pistol out, blew their brains out, drove away, right? Because they weren't all in one place. They were all over the place. But they were in the Nukunba. They were in one of their historical neck of the woods, which is, about 1,000 square miles, right? Which is, 500 this way, 500 that way. And it's just below, it's right on one of the strongest, ley lines that goes right through Ayers Rock. Ayers Rock was one of their sacred sites, right? But now you can't even go to Ayers Rock anymore. That place is so sacred that even a white person who, knew nothing, led a very materialistic, worked in a factory, da da da. And, this bus that Don and I took around the country of Australia to get to where we were going, meaning they could have given us a vehicle and we could have driven right from the capital to where they were. That was about 900 miles. But we went from the capital to Sydney, to Melbourne, to Adelaide, to Perth, to a few other places, to Pine Gap, to Broome, down to Ayers Rock, down to Christmas Creek. So that we traveled like maybe 5,000 miles on a bus, right? And the majority of the people were old Australian folk who hadn't gone on a vacation. They were half the people would, have oxygen tanks, and just because they'd never seen their country and this was their last shot of their bucket, they had a little bit of a pension and they took this bus tour, right? And they had a pensioner's bus tour ticket, Our ticket, I think, cost $60, And so, the guy actually drove a little bit off of the main path and dropped us off at Christmas Creek. He knew where it was. Normally he would come here and he kind of jogged a little bit to drop us off there, and which was nice of him. And I had, all of the bus drivers, I would sit up front, even if Don picked a little nest somewhere else, I would sit up front and talk to the bus driver. Because at certain times he'd just be driving. And if he didn't have somebody to talk to, he'd fall asleep and run the bus into a ditch. One of the bus drivers did that. So after he did that, I kind of would stay up with these guys and have them tell me stories about what they saw and did. And that's when and in Australia, there were some really, people like Rupert Murdoch, Reginald Anson, really rich, powerful, almost satanic kind of guys. And I would observe them and what they did to their own country and how it was a police state, even though everyone thought they lived in a free country. And they kind of, when the Queen came to back there was a big thing between the Labour and the Liberal Party. And the Liberal Party always got in, for 125 years they ruled. Labour Party would win some seats, so they had a little bit of pull. But it was just there to keep the workers, somewhat contained. But the people got so pissed off with how the corporations had taken everything in Australia. And the Labour Party said, listen, you vote us in, we're going to kick these guys out tomorrow. And they were serious. And so all the polls showed that the Labour Party was going to win by a landslide. And the Queen showed up. Elizabeth showed up. She flew in and she went to the major cities, Canberra, the capital, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and she left Adelaide. And each one of those things, each city got a week off from their, paid, and because they were supposed to be out there, by the side of the road waving at the Queen. Well, every city she went to, people got a week off. Well, they friggin' went to the beach. They just left town and left her there all by herself. And so it didn't look too good on TV. She would go down the main roads of these big cities and there'd be nobody friggin' there. So by the time she hit Perth, she was pissed. And she just went to Adelaide, got on the airplane and flew out of there. And as she left, she wrote a decree. And they have in the Australian Parliament, the Queen's representative who wears these kind of, girly clothes, these pantaloon things from, the 9th century from Henry IV. And he has the Queen's scepter there, right? Represents her power. Anyway, as soon as she flew out, when she's at the airport, she signed this document declaring martial law in Australia. And the day of the election, the guy said, I got this document from the Queen, martial law, the election is off. The Labour Party's in power for the next however long martial law is going to last. And, it lasted, for a long time, at least 7 months, I think. And, but the strange thing was, if you said, and you couldn't, everything was, the newspapers, everything, couldn't say anything. TV, couldn't say anything. Radio, no, if you said anything on the corner, they came and put a bag over your head and never saw that person again. But petty thievery, totally, the cops didn't go after you. Drunkenness, no problem. Car crashes with alcohol, no problem. The courts didn't enforce any of those laws. The people could go be as stupid as they wanted to be, right? And so people, oh, this is martial law. This is great, And they started these things, drive-through bars, where you got, the big gulp, the liter size. You get a liter margarita or a liter, martini or a liter just straight whiskey, and you could drink it while you were driving, no problem. I saw this one guy in Melbourne. They had trolleys. I really love Melbourne trolleys. And they had tuplets where all the different trolley lines would kind of cross, right? And they were these big traffic circle things, and the trolley cars were, right? And there were like 5 different roads coming into them. And there were about 4 or 5 of these just cluster bracks in Melbourne, right? It was like whoever did this was like on drugs. So I had a friend who had a store, right? And he was Middle Eastern, and he had great moussaka. I love his moussaka. And I would go there and hang out with him, and we'd play chess and cards, and I'd eat moussaka and drink, his liquor. And he distilled himself. He made these nice liqueurs. And I was sitting there, and in the hour or so, or maybe longer, maybe 3 hours, I was there eating moussaka and the meat that they cut off the vertical spigot. I'm having slices of meat and moussaka and bread he makes right there, and drinking his things. And he says, look at this place. It just opened. It's a drive-through bar. I said, drive-through bar? He said, yeah, it's not even a liquor store. You don't buy the bottle. You buy, and they put them in. Look at the cups. And out front, they had this giant-sized sippy cup, liter cocktail. So it was called liter cocktail, like liter, And you would drive through, and you would get one of these gigantic mugs of a cocktail, whatever booze you wanted in there. And this guy was so desperate, he went through a red light, down through this cluster thing, and all of these trolleys were coming,